All right, so are you ready to go deeper than just giving up chocolate for Lent?
Yeah, I think we're ready
Okay,
then.
good. Because we're going to do a deep dive today on this article, Lent, a season of repentance and renewal.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
It's by this guy, Reverend Father Pius Ralph Effiong. And it's pretty interesting, even if you aren't particularly religious, I think.
Yeah, I really liked how he brings in a lot of history,
Yeah, yeah,
which you don't always see.
that's true. I always thought Lent was pretty much just about, like, spring, new beginnings, all that.
Yeah, but there's a pretty common misunderstanding. I think the article goes way back, looks at the word, the origins, and it turns out that Lent actually has to do with the number 40,
Hmm.
like the 40 days that Jesus was fasting out in the desert.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, so it's kind of connected to like a big story right from the start.
So,
What I thought was really interesting, though, is how the article points out that the Bible has a bunch of these 40-day periods, like the Israelites in the desert,
Mhm.
Moses on Mount Sinai. I don't know, what is it about 40 that makes it so important?
I think it's that idea of a testing period, or maybe even a transformation. You see it a lot, even outside of religion.
Right, right.
Like it's an archetype almost. But what really surprised me was finding out that Lent wasn't always 40 days.
Serious.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shocker.
Wow.
So back in the early church, they did fasting before Easter, but the length of it was all over the place.
Mm.
It could be a couple days, maybe a whole week, but there wasn't a standard. It wasn't until the 4th century at the Council of Nicaea that they settled on 40 days as the official thing.
Wow, so Lent, as we know it today, is way more recent than people think.
Definitely. And kind of makes you think about how traditions, change over time.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of change, the article says that Lent has like a dual purpose. It's not just getting ready for Easter.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
What do you mean dual purpose?
Yeah. Well, for folks who are getting ready to become Christian, like studying and everything, they're called catechumens.
Hmm.
Lent was their last prep before they got baptized on Easter.
Hmm.
And baptism, it's all about rebirth. So it makes sense that this period would be a big deal.
Right.
But for people who were already Christian, Lent was more about reliving their own baptism, kind of like a spiritual refresh.
Oh, okay, like hitting the reset button on your beliefs.
Exactly.
That makes sense, even if you aren't religious, right? Like spring cleaning for your whole life, getting rid of bad habits, starting fresh. We all do that sometimes.
For sure. Yeah, it's like a universal thing. The article spends a lot of time talking about repentance, too.
Oh, yeah. That word always sounds kind of heavy.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be all mopey and guilty for 40 days. But the way the article talks about it, repentance in the Bible isn't so much about feeling bad. It's more like changing direction, getting back on track with what you believe in, whether that's like your personal values, your goals, whatever.
Okay, so less about guilt and more about action.
Exactly. And he even uses this image of like tearing your heart, not your clothes, to show it's all about inner change, not what you look like on the outside.
That's a really striking image.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, and so relevant. I mean, we all get caught up sometimes in trying to look good, putting on a show instead of dealing with what's going on inside.
Yeah.
This idea of turning back, checking in with yourself, making sure you're living by your values, I think we can all use a little bit of that.
Definitely. And it's not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Which brings us to like, what does Lent actually look like in practice?
Okay, yeah. So more than just giving up chocolate, like what are the key things people actually do during Lent?
So the article breaks it down into 3 main practices: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving.
All right, let's break those down then. First up, prayer. So what's different about praying during Lent?
Well, it's not just about saying the same old words or like going through the motions.
Right.
It's about, really trying to connect, have an authentic relationship, whatever that means to you.
So it's about being more intentional, more present in your practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I like that. Now, what about fasting?
Well, the basic idea is that when you deny yourself something, you're building up your willpower and you're creating space for spiritual growth.
So it's not just depriving yourself for no reason.
No. Yeah.
It's choosing to like focus your energy on something else.
Exactly.
Which makes a lot of sense, with how our world is today. It's like we're always being distracted, constantly tempted.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's about taking back control over your desires, impulses. That could be anything. Food, technology, whatever is taking up all your time and energy.
Right, right. Like a mental and spiritual detox.
Exactly. And then finally, there's almsgiving.
Okay, what's that all about?
It's about giving to others, but it goes beyond just donating money.
Yeah.
The article really stresses that Real almsgiving is about seeing everyone as equal
Mm.
and, acting with compassion.
So not just writing a check, but really engaging with people's needs, being present.
Exactly.
Oh.
And it also challenges us to look at ourselves. What are we holding on to too tightly? What could we be sharing?
Wow, this is really making me think about Lent in a whole new way. It's not just about giving things up.
Yeah.
It's about choosing something better, whether that's a stronger connection with, well, whatever you believe in, having more self-control, being kinder to the people around you.
It's about living your values, not just thinking about them.
I'm blown away by how much depth there is to this tradition. There's so much more to it than I ever realized.
It really is fascinating. And honestly, we've only just scratched the surface. Reading this article actually changed how I think about fasting.
Okay.
I used to see it as this like purely restrictive thing, almost like a punishment.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I kind of thought the same thing, but this article spins it totally differently. It's less about deprivation and more about like being intentional, right? Like
Yeah.
choosing to shift your focus, your energy.
That's it. Father Effiong talks about how when you say no to physical pleasures, it can actually like make you more spiritually aware. It's like you're making space for something bigger.
That's such a good way to put it. And it makes you think, right, about how much our world today is all about, like constant stimulation, always being distracted. Maybe we could all use a little bit of fasting, even outside of religion.
I think so too. It's about getting that control back over your attention, what you want. The article even mentions like the psychological benefits, you know, stronger willpower, better self-discipline.
Yeah, like a workout, but for your spirit. And speaking of choosing what you focus on, the stuff about almsgiving was super insightful.
Totally agree. Kind of blew my mind about what giving actually means.
Right. It's not just about charity, like donating money and stuff. It's more about seeing how everyone deserves respect, that everyone's important, and responding to that with compassion.
Exactly. And that's a big point that Father Effiong makes. Real almsgiving, it goes way deeper than just like throwing money at a problem. It's about getting involved, seeing how connected we all are, and actually doing something to help.
Yeah, it's about closing that gap between us and them, realizing we're all in this together. And it's not even just about helping other people. The article says that almsgiving can be a way to like renew yourself too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It really makes you look at what you're holding on to. Like, is there stuff I could be sharing? What am I putting ahead of other people's needs? It's like a challenge to look at the bigger picture.
It's funny. I always thought about Lent as this kind of, gloomy time. I was like, you're supposed to feel guilty. But this article, it makes it feel totally different. It's actually really hopeful, kind of empowering even.
Yeah, totally. It's not about getting stuck on your mistakes. It's about seeing that you can change, you know? You've got the power to choose differently, to live more on purpose, to connect more deeply with, well, whatever you believe in, and with other people.
And it's not like it has to be limited to just those 40 days either. All this stuff, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, it's stuff you can do all year round.
Absolutely. It's not just for religious people. It's like tools for growing as a person, spiritually, no matter what you believe.
And speaking of that, there was this one quote from Fulton J. Sheen that Father Effiong put in the article, and it really stuck with me.
Oh, you mean the one about how pleasure isn't the point of life, it's what happens when you do good.
Yes, that one. It totally changed how I think about being happy.
Yeah, it's so deep. It's like instead of chasing after feeling good all the time, maybe it's about finding your purpose, helping others, trying to be better.
And it's not just about some vague idea of being good either. He talks about wanting to please God, which even if you aren't religious, you could think of it as like trying to be the best version of yourself, living by your values.
That's a great point. It's like shooting for something bigger than just yourself. And the crazy thing is when you do that, the joy, the good feelings, they just come naturally. They're not the goal. They're like a bonus.
Such a huge shift in how you look at things, and it all ties back to this idea of Lent as a time for turning back, getting your priorities straight, remembering what's important.
Right. It's not about being punished. It's about growing, choosing a path that leads to real satisfaction for you and everyone around you.
This has been so eye-opening. It's amazing how much wisdom there is in these old traditions.
I know, right? And the real challenge, I think, is figuring out how to take all this and actually live it. Make it real for us, you know?
That's a good point. So as we finish this part of our deep dive, What are your final thoughts? What does all this mean for the listener? How can they take these ideas and make them their own, even when it's not Lent?
It's kind of funny when you think about it because Lent is often like presented as this super specific thing with all these rules and rituals.
Right.
But what we've been talking about, in this deep dive is that it's actually something way more, well, universal.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's the whole religion part of it, but even if you take that away, the main ideas are still something everyone can relate to. I mean, who hasn't felt like they need a reset sometimes? To look at their habits, try and do better.
Exactly. It's that feeling of wanting to be better, to connect more, to find more meaning. And that goes beyond just what you believe.
Totally. And speaking of interesting stuff, the article ends with this really thought-provoking quote by Fulton J. Sheen.
Oh, yeah.
He says that pleasure, it's not like the purpose of life. It's more of a side effect of doing good. It's kind of like saying that instead of always chasing happiness, maybe we should be focusing on living a life with purpose, helping others, aiming for something bigger than just ourselves.
It really changes how you look at things,
Yeah.
doesn't it? And the article ties this back to Lent, this whole idea of turning back, getting your priorities straight. It's not about being punished. It's about growing and choosing a path that actually leads you to, well, feeling fulfilled.
And you know what I think, turning back like that, it doesn't have to be a once-a-year thing. It's something you can do all the time, checking in with yourself, making changes when you need to, always trying to be better.
Definitely. It's like a journey,
Yeah.
figuring yourself out and growing.
Yeah.
And Lent, with all its focus on thinking, choosing, and doing, it can really help you along the way.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. What does your Lent look like? And I don't mean just during the actual season, but anytime you feel like you need to reflect, make a positive change. What are you willing to turn back from? And what are you turning towards?
That's a really good question.
Mm,
And I think it gets to the heart of what we've been talking about today, that Lent, it's not just a time of year, it's a way of life.
absolutely. Well, on that note, that's going to do it for this episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking for those moments where you can renew yourself and grow. It doesn't matter what time of year it is.